Throughout history, women have faced numerous significant struggles that have shaped their roles in society and laid the groundwork for rights and opportunities many enjoy today. From the tireless fight for suffrage to quest for legal rights that allowed them to own property and gain custody of their children, women's activism has spanned centuries. Access to education has been another critical battle as women sought to break free from restrictions that denied them the right to learn. Discrimination in the workplace, including unequal pay and limited job opportunities, has further underscored the challenges women have historically encountered. Additionally, reproductive rights, violence and oppression, and cultural norms and expectations have presented ongoing obstacles. It's quite the journey. But sometimes the biggest struggle they continue to face is the generational divide amongst themselves. This is probably the biggest irony of their gender collective. Hello, everyone. I'm Goldie, your host for today.
And I'm Lakshan, your co host. And this is episode 24 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
In celebration of Women's History Month, I invite us as women to rise above the differences and barriers that separate our generations and instead work together to foster collective advancement for all. Today's episode will be divided into two parts: mental health and ageism. Each part is centered around a theme that envelops every woman, but is also viewed and interpreted with nuances that can sometimes be the cause of division between them. Lakshan, I love that we get to talk about this subject together, as you can give me your perspective from the other side. Now, before addressing each part, I am curious to learn how you see or view different generations of this gender.
So I agree with you when you mentioned early on, a little bit early on, when you mentioned that the biggest struggle for this generation, for this gender, is the generational divide amongst themselves. And because of that, sometimes I feel like women can be their own worst enemy because of how previous generations have the beliefs that they have held, saying this is how it is like to be a woman, these are the duties and the responsibilities and the things you have to put up with, things you have to accept even though you don't believe in them. And they try to, or not just they try to, they do actively teach those same things and try to instill those very same beliefs to the generations that come after, without understanding that times have changed, and what may have been the case back then, what may have served them back then, is not going to serve the current generation or the ones that have come after theirs. So I feel for that reason, sometimes women can be their own worst enemies.
Yeah. And I think that neatly puts us into, part one, which as I was listening to you, I recognized several examples where in my own community, in my own family, rather, there have been instances where the women have become their own worst enemies had they not had the support of other women from other generations. The reason I say this is because the topic that we're going to cover now, the part one, is mental health. And it's obviously a word everyone is familiar with, but it also means so many different things to different women. Now, we know that younger generations of women are increasingly aware of the importance of, prioritizing their mental health and confront related issues with courage and determination above all. But this is a stark contrast to the experiences of, older women who often lacked the privilege, perhaps, to do the same. Many older women were raised in an environment, sadly, where they were expected to suppress their emotions and ignore any signs of mental health struggles. For what? In order to survive. We know the silent generation comes from this. And this is continued to be seen in professional settings or even many cultural ones. This generational gap can often lead to so many misunderstandings, harsh judgments, and especially unrealistic expectations, as the younger ones face criticism, often from the older women, and they're viewed as weak, overly sensitive, or self-absorbed. We have also seen this opinion before, haven't we? Stereotyped, especially for our favorite Gen Z. An example I want to give here is of a notable Olympian called Simone Biles, who bravely spoke about the abuse she endured and the mental health challenges that she arose from it. So, despite being a top athlete, she faced immense pressure to maintain her status as we know her, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, even while struggling. Her decision was to withdraw from team competition for the sake of her mental health. And this resulted in a lot of backlash, primarily from who? The older generations. It's vital to recognize that young women like Biles do deserve admiration, for their honesty and bravery in prioritizing, their mental health rather than ridicule, which is what they get instead. So just because previous generations weren't able to advocate for their mental well-being, doesn't that mean that today's youth should follow a very different pattern? Shouldn't we be breaking the cycle? Conversely, there are also young women who harshly criticize older women for not placing the same emphasis on their mental health. So instead of casting judgment, I also urge these younger women to take a step back and to actually consider the historical context and appreciate that the struggles of their predecessors have actually paved the way for freedom to advocate mental health today. Without their perseverance, the opportunity to push for change may not have existed. I see there's a lot of unpacking here we can do. Lakshan, you are a millennial man, so you are very well aware of the mental health narrative. And we have spoken about this in past episodes. Do you think it creates the same divide for men of different generations?
I think example that you gave of Simone Biles, I feel like it is a generational thing, irrespective
Mm,
of whether it's with respect to women or men. That older generations feel like this is ridiculous, or this, tough it up, this comes with what this is, the price of success, or whatever it is, right? That's the narrative that exists. And as you were sharing that example, I was reminded of another example, a little more recent than what would have been the case for the Olympian, I believe.
mm,
It's a story of Magnus Carlsen, who is the chess goat, and he had given up his throne of the world champion after having won it 5 times in a row, because he felt there were various reasons, but one of the reasons was the fact that he was like, now when I go ahead and win the championship, I don't feel happy. I'm just relieved. Right? It's like all this stress of preparing. Finally, when it's over and I won, I'm not even happy. Right? It's not something that a lot of us will ever experience, having so much expectations from everybody.
mm.
Right? So much so that when it's done, you're just like, thank God it's over. Not that, oh my God, I achieved something great. And because we don't understand the perspective of what it takes to be a champion, or to have so many expectations, very easily we point fingers and say, you're not tough enough, you're not this, you're not that. Now, this is not to talk about those few elite people on top who can't, who we can't relate to. I feel like this can be extrapolated with respect to everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, just basically that very easy to point fingers and say this is how it is, that's how it is. But unless you find yourselves in their shoes, you don't understand why things are the way they are. And I'm very happy that the younger generations are a lot more vocal about this mental health aspect of things, because older generations did not have to deal with the social media aspect,
Mm,
which is that anybody from anywhere in the world at any time in the day can be sending you messages and getting your attention through very vile comments. So the
yeah.
last thing you want is for that kind of negativity to be around you all the time from people you don't even know exist, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, just as you mentioned the story in the context of women, I feel like it is similar for men as well.
Mm,
I feel that both generations, are, the older generations from both genders can be rigid in their thinking, and we have, men have their own, say, narrative of, like real men don't cry and things of that nature. There's all those stereotypes as well. Again, it served a purpose back then. Right now it doesn't serve the same purpose. On a generational context, maybe on a personal unique context, maybe it does. Who am I to say what things should and shouldn't be like, really? But on a generation level, I feel like what it's like the title of Marshall Goldsmith's book, no, what got you here won't get you there. So doing the very
Mm.
same thing that served you all the way to come here, it's not going to serve you to go where you want to go. So that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Uh, I particularly resonated with this whole idea of see the person for who they are and not the generation they come from. Uh, and on that note, I just want to pull on that thread just for a little bit longer because I feel it's really important. You and I both come from the same ethnic background, and the way we've been raised has always been controversial in terms of the word mental health. I think, yes, so you and I understand it, and we are actually very committed to it because we work in a profession that addresses this on a day to day. However, if we both look back into our families or just the elders that surround us, I mean, I speak for myself. I have a member in my family who belongs to the silent generation, and she's had considerable amount of mental health situations and issues where I very distinctly remember this person was struggling to a point where even she wasn't aware that she was having mental health issues. She was just trying to figure out how to feel better. And I remember recognizing it at the time and telling my family, I think this person needs something more than what we are doing just by having conversations, with her. And I did receive backlash at the time from not just the generation of this person, but even my own generation. And it shocked me at the time, though of course I went with my instinct and I took this person to see a mental health professional, and thank goodness, because she was then diagnosed with a series of things. So it's really just a matter of um, gaining knowledge, I think, and let's keep up with what's going on. And health is more than just physical health, isn't it? It's mental, sometimes more importantly mental health than just so. And yeah, women tend to do this, and then I have to recognize it because I've seen it with my own eyes. And so now, this neatly brings us in to part two. It took me a while to understand how to label this section. It could have been titled many things, but I think what really encompasses and just kind of umbrellas the whole thing is age. And so I'm going to talk about ageism. The person I mentioned earlier was somebody who today is in her 80s and I'm in my 40s, yet somehow there's always this distinction of women where we want to see each other for the age that we are and not for the people that we are. And I want to start by saying that from the workplace to social media, women are constantly told this limiting story that there's a finite amount of room for female success and they must battle fiercely to claim their share. I do believe this limiting belief honestly stems largely from the never ending fight for equality. So, equal opportunity that has turned into a form of, let's say, fear in many older women, especially. This mentality creates unnecessary competition, amongst women, especially of different generations, instead of actually fostering an environment where they can support and uplift one another. Social media further exasperates this issue, reinforcing, corporate and cultural stereotypes. We've seen so much of that too, portraying younger women as, either overly ambitious or naive, while positioning older women as, out of touch or resistant to change. So this narrative, as stale and ugly as it is, it breeds division, but also perpetuates this word I was talking about, ageism, reinforcing this damaging notion that being a certain age is inherently a disadvantage for women. Now, why do these age related issues even take place in the first place? I was curious to understand. On the surface, it's obvious. This pressure that females have always faced about, looking a certain way. But there's more. There's definitely more. Lana Johnson, a CEO of a organization called Taking It Forward, she highlights four major pressures that affect women today: the generational tension arising from conflicting demands, misunderstandings stemming from the evolution of feminism, this is a good one, damaging stereotypes, and the competition for recognition that obstructs, wait for it, collaboration. So, competition versus collaboration. There's a strong tendency still to be on the competitive side. All of this makes me think of one word, Lakshan: a mindset of scarcity or limitations. Like there's not enough for everyone on the table, and especially for women. And this comes, from the age old fight to get what is ours because it's being snatched away from us. I get it. There was a time when things were snatched away. And to add to that hurdle, you can even call it almost an expiry date to qualify for what you deserve. So you're too old to have a baby because you're not fit anymore. You're too old to get that promotion because there's somebody waiting behind you, and so on. And it irks me, honestly, it makes me so upset that this is leading to an unhealthy competition between women who are apparently supposed to be on the same side, yet, see each other as threats. In a very logical sense, this apparent competition is actually not even real because it's fueled by media predominantly. And it undermines what we could see as a powerful potential for intergeneral, collaboration, whereas instead it becomes into a competition. And, on that note, Lakshan, I do want to share personal experience from my time at boarding school. So we're talking over 30 years ago. Um, I was still Gen X back then, but I was also a teenager. And, I attended an all girls boarding school. So that's where it starts. Okay. Where we took part in this program called Young Enterprise. For those of you who are familiar with the British education system, will know what I'm talking about. It's an initiative that allowed us to create our own business and compete against other schools, aiming to be recognized as young entrepreneurs. Okay, so in our year group, several teams emerged, with two of them standing as strong contenders to represent our school. So we were all on the same team. Let's just get this clear. But we were within a year group, and they had to make one choice. I was part of one of those teams, and our teacher, in fact, encouraged us to collaborate rather than compete. I distinctly remember the rivalry between the two business ideas, and looking back, it seems rather trivial. Ultimately, we succeeded at regionals and won the competition, which was a significant achievement, for an all girls school. However, if I'm honest, I believe the underlying mindset of competition lingered even after our victory. And so this was part of the same generational cohort. And yes, we were teenagers. There was a lot of insecurity. But I do feel that this external competition is just an inner voice actually telling us it's so hard for us women and we are just doing our best. Instead of listening to that voice, society, especially media, they tend to keep us divided because this, and this hinders our collective power and prevents us from harnessing our truest power when we unite. You've been listening attentively, Lakshan. How do you think we can shift this narrative from competition to collaboration, amongst women, especially in the workplace? I'm curious to know.
I feel like what you spoke about with respect to the media being a major culprit to why this divide exists, I think the first step is in that, recognizing that it's when you actually have a conversation one on one with other women, you realize that, oh, we're on the same boat, same page, looking to go to the same destination. And when I look into the horizon, I see that way more than enough for all of us. When you were sharing the first portion of this ageism section, what came to my mind was exactly what you said. No, this scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset, as we in coaching, we are very familiar with. So that's what came up for me, which is to forget about what the media says. It's hard, I know, and actually start having conversations one on one, because you and I are all for competition, Goldie. Let's not deny that, but we are all in for healthy competition, right? The kind of competition that makes us better as professionals and as people. And I feel like when we allow things to get in the way and kind of muddy the waters and distort what we actually want, I think we forget what we are really here for, and we start pointing fingers at each other and start creating problems. I feel like the same way that women of all generations over the course of time have come together and stood in unity to fight for their rights and whatever it is, right? For suffrage, for owning property, uh, custody of the children, reproductive rights, feminism, all this stuff. The same way that women have united for this one purpose against the rest of society, so to say, I feel like the same way women should also, I won't say should, I feel like it would serve them a lot more if they did the same thing in the context of generations. You know what I mean? I feel like
Mm,
that will help a lot more, because there are conversations that I'm somewhat privy to. I know these are not conversations that guys are typically privy to, but women will talk about what's happening in the workplace with other women
mm,
in close circles and close groups without escalating it or bringing it up the same way they would other issues, let's say. And I feel like not bringing it up, not uniting to address this topic, I feel is doing a disservice for them, because when you realize that at the end of the day all of us want the same thing, which is
yeah,
again the one of the primary reasons that this podcast exists, right? To remind people that hey, all of us want the same thing.
yeah.
I feel like once we get to that place, it'll be a lot easier to move from this competition mindset to a collaborative mindset. And I know for a fact that the younger generations, irrespective of what gender they are, they do have a more collaborative mindset than a competitive one, maybe a little too collaborative. But I feel like change, I would expect change to show up more um, clearly with respect to the current generations and the ones that come beyond. That's that's what comes up for me, because
Mm.
in the context of the workplace, that's what I see happening, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, it just reminded me of something, the main element here, I think that's coming up for the generational divide is a deep rooted one that comes from the mindset that we've been raised with. And to cut that and break the cycle, especially in the workplace, you know, having female mentorship would be so effective, I think. So we've spoken about this before, haven't we? Where different generations should mentor their younger cohorts or vice versa. I believe a similar formula could be of value for women in the workplace. And let's learn from one another because we want the same thing, as you said. So it's about wanting the same thing. So this comes back to uh, equality, but I'm going to challenge that. If instead of seeing it as equality, I think it can be regarded as equity, which I'm going to come to because I'm going to explain this concept. Um, if a boomer, I'm going to give an example now, and I'm going to put it in the Indian context because that's where I resonate with, and you will too. Let's call her Parvati, okay? She's considered that her freedom and equality comes from giving birth to as many male offsprings. This is her definition and interpretation of freedom and equality because she comes from a mindset of a boomer. Let's just be clear here, this disclaimer, okay? This is a very stereotype example and I'm owning it. she would later expect her daughter, I'm not even going to the daughter in law part, her daughter to also adopt the same ideals. Mala, her daughter, who now belongs to Generation X, cannot bear a son, or rather, she doesn't really care to have a male or female because her equality lies in having the opportunity to advance in her career. So you see how the mindset shifts over generations, and the story obviously goes on and on. Now, what Parvati believes and what Mala believe are two different things. Yet maybe Parvati will hold Mala down and want her to do what she felt was best, and that's her definition of equality. So I'm challenging the actual interpretation of what that means for each woman, and why are we seeing it as a generational divide rather in the present moment, in the context that you're in, what does it mean to you? And that should be honored by every other woman. And the only way that we can break the cycle of competition is if we choose to reframe our vision. So now I ask you all to invite, what if we substituted the word equality for equity? The latter acknowledges that individuals have different needs, different challenges, and different starting points. It focuses on providing appropriate resources to support and ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed in the context of the life they are in. So we are no longer worried about going and chasing the same dream, because that can be a different one depending on who you are. And I think this would disable media to dictate how women see each other. Instead of focusing on differences like age, education, or what each one is fighting for, we would actually seek common ground. And I love what you said earlier about having open conversations, because I think this clears up a lot of misconceptions, between generations, and builds bridges. And that is how we truly mind the gen gap. A very happy International Women's Day to all our female listeners, because it really is an important day. And let's not forget that there's been a lot of fight for us to reach to where we are. Please spread this conversation with your community, and don't forget to follow us. If you have come till the end, thank you so much for watching us and also listening to us, and do leave us a 5-star review. With that, we have come to the end of episode 24 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I have been your host, Goldie.
And I've been your co host, Lakshan. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and tuning in all the way to the very end.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.